So thank you guys for joining. I appreciate you coming. If you were here 2 years ago, we actually did a MAP lunch and learn, which is what we used to call these. But we're doing another one just to do some updates and so that you guys can kind of see why and how we've shifted. Are you guys able to see my screen? All right.
We see ourselves.
You see yourselves. So I think once I close that, I had to open it up to let people in. So let me see if once I close it, are you able to see the back screen now? Okay, awesome. All right. Well, we'll get started. I'm not sure why it chooses certain people to be on the home screen or not. So sorry if you're appearing on here. I'll close it down. That way it doesn't appear on the recording. But we'll get started. We're going to talk a little bit about MAP testing. And so you guys know your children have just finished MAP testing, but a lot of people have questions about what it is and how it functions. So I just wanted to go through a few things. So what we're going to talk about today is we'll talk about what is MAP growth. We'll talk about what is MAP reading fluency, which is a new thing that we've done in the last really year. We'll talk about how you can prepare your child for MAP. What shifts have we made regarding MAP testing and why? And then when you'll get the reports and how do you read them? Sorry, I've got to switch back and forth to let people in. All right. Let me make sure everybody's in. I think we're all in here. I don't see anybody waiting in the lobby. Okay, so we'll get started with what is MAP growth and what is fluency. Oh, people keep popping in, sorry. Unfortunately, all the other admin are occupied right now, so I don't have anybody here letting people in. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what is MAP growth. So MAP growth is what we just finished. It's the days that we told you about, where the kids will all take it at one time. So MAP growth, and this is how they describe it on their, I'm sorry, it really wants to show you the whole time. This is how MAP describes themselves. So I just quoted it from them. The standard bearer for measuring achievement and growth in K-12 math, reading, language usage, and science. Anyway, I know you can read that, but of course they describe themselves as, you know, the top of the top, but we really do appreciate how they report things. All right, sorry, getting a couple more people in. So for us, what I take away from MAP and what you need to know as parents is that it's computer adaptive. So that to me is actually the most important component of MAP. It's not like the STAR test that your kids would take and it would say, okay, here's third grade material. Do they know third grade material because they're in third grade? What computer adaptive means is if it's the first time they take it, they will start them on questions that are appropriate for that grade level. And then it will adjust more difficult or easier based on the way that they answer. If they've taken it before at Village, and it won't follow them school to school if you've gone to different schools that do MAP, but if they've taken it before at Village, it knows where they were and it's going to start around there, around the place where they expected them to grow, and then it's going to adjust. And so the beauty of that is that we really do see, is this exactly what the kid knows? Is it that they know more than their current grade level, they know less than their current grade level, and are they growing? So what I just said, are they growing? It's focused on growth, and that's a really big thing for us because most of our kids are above grade level, and so we don't want to stagnate them by just because they're in third grade, giving them just third grade content. We want to make sure that they're continually growing. And so really with your kids and with us at school, we're focused on making sure that that trajectory is going up. So in kinder and first grade, they take what is called MAP for primary. So it's actually a K-2 test, but there's an overlap because the next one is a 2-5 test. So in K1, they do at Village the MAP for primary reading and math. MAP for primary differs from the older one because it's read to them. So it has a little speaker box and the kids can click on it, or it will automatically read them the questions until they get to the more difficult sections if they're more advanced. Then in 2 to 4, we switched to the MAP growth, which is for 2 to 5. Got somebody here, I hear it. Nope. So in that MAP growth for 2 to 5, the difference is going to be that it's not read to them. So those little speaker boxes go away. We also add language usage in 2 to 5. And then in middle school, they do add the science component, but they do at Village School take MAP every year until grade 10. All right, so what might MAP growth look like in the classroom? These are the dates that we tell you, hey, we're doing MAP testing. Be sure that they, are at school on time, things like that. You know about these dates because MAP growth looks like all the kids doing it at one time. So all the kids are on their iPads at the same time. The test starts with those questions about where they should be based on their predictive growth. It's going to adapt and change based on your child, how your child does. Our K to 1 students, they do wear headphones because it's read to them until they get high enough that the test is really looking at their ability to read a passage. Then our 2 to 4 students, they don't typically wear headphones. Sometimes the teacher will ask them to put them on just to help them focus, not on kids that are near them. But it's not being read to them, it's just to help kind of zone them in. And then I do want you to know that we make an accommodation for kids on that WIDA test, which is our assessment of English language. If they are a 3 or below, which really means their language is still developing, they will get text-to-speech on math. And I want you to know why we do math and not ELA. So the reason we do math and not ELA is because ELA, we're trying to figure out, can they read? What can they read? What do they understand when they read? And if they're language learners, that's okay. It gives us a baseline of where they are and what we need to do. But on math, I don't want to assess if they can read the math question, because then I'm assessing reading again. What I want to know from math is, can they do the math? And so we do give them that accommodation on math so that then it's read to them and it takes the heavy load off of trying to read the passage in math and really just lets them get to the computation part. So the tests are not timed, and this is a big one for our kiddos. Students can take as much time as they need. They're encouraged to do that. If a kid is making rapid guesses, the test will actually flag them and it will stop them, and the teacher has to restart them. If we also notice, sometimes at the end, it'll say they've made, 10% rapid guesses. It doesn't necessarily flag them yet, but it'll show us that they did make those rapid guesses. Sometimes we'll make them take it again if we notice that. But the beauty is that it will actually stop them. I'm going to stop for just a second. I want to make sure that I don't have people waiting back here. It doesn't look like it. Okay, I hear people, but I don't see anybody waiting. If you're not on mute, go ahead and put yourself on mute so I don't hear background noises. All right. Let me go back to where we were. So that's MAP growth. That's what MAP growth looks like. Again, it's everybody doing it all together in the same classroom, and that's what we tell you, hey, they're taking it so that you can be ready. MAP reading fluency looks a little different, and this is our new one that we've only done the last couple of years. So MAP reading fluency, again, this is how they describe themselves, so it sounds really great and lovely, but we do like what they do. It is a benchmark test. It can be done as a group. I'm going to tell you how we do it at Village, but it also comes along with, it can identify screening. So it'll say, hey, this kid is flagged. I think you might want to look and see if they need a little extra support. It can flag them for potential reading difficulties like dyslexia. But the way that we do it, again, it's computer adaptive. It maximizes instructional time because when a teacher sits down and does a one-on-one reading test with the kids, it does give them great information. But what it does is it takes away days or a week of instructional time because the teacher has sat down one by one for 20 to 30 minutes. So the beauty of this is that it's recording them. So they're wearing headphones. It's got the stick mic, which is why we asked you to get the headphones with the microphone, and it actually captures what they read. So I, as a teacher, can go back and listen to what they read, but it's going to score it and tell me where they are for me so that the teacher can continue working with kids. It's a great early identifier for reading difficulties too. So what does this look like in the classroom? So we wouldn't actually tell you guys, hey, this is the day they're doing map reading fluency. And the reason for that is not because we don't want you to know. It's because it takes place over the course of a week. So really, the last week after map, the teachers have been doing map reading fluency. And it looks like them testing probably 3 to 4 students at a time, because we need to capture their voice and we don't want to capture overlap between students. They're going to sit in different locations. So they're going to sit in different corners of their classroom. They might sit in the hallway. That way the teacher can continue teaching and doing small group while the kids are doing this, but you're not picking up all the noise. The students are using those headphones with the mic. One of the things we have to work really hard on with the kids is not pushing that mic up to their mouths, because then it actually muffles their voice, just to leave it alone so that you don't hear the shh from them messing with it. But they do use the headphone with the mic. If the test can't capture their reading, it will let us know that we can either score it by hand or they can redo it. It does take about 20 to 30 minutes. It's got some different components that we'll talk about. So typically K1 is going to take the foundational skills. So that's going to look at phonological awareness, which we'll talk about in a minute. And it's going to look at phonics skills. And so that's going to tell us all of their reading readiness skills. For our older kids, so typically by winter of 1st grade through our 4th graders, they usually don't need to do foundational skills, or they need to do little pieces of foundational skills, but then they'll go into the oral reading fluency. And again, we're going to talk about what this stuff means. So between the benchmarks, teachers can assign progress monitoring, and this is a great way to keep up with how they're moving forward and just a really quick snapshot. So these are kind of the different things that you would see them test on the foundational skills portion. So it's going to start with the phonological awareness, the things that are up at the top: rhyming, syllables, initial sounds, blending and segmenting, all those things. Then it'll move into phonics and word recognition. So they're just little short tests where it'll say, they'll practice, and then it'll say, okay, see how many you can do in 2 minutes. And the kids will go then identify it. And I'm gonna talk about how you can prepare them, but then I'm gonna come back and tell you why some of this is important, because it is new. So this is always a big question that parents ask if kids haven't done MAP before, is how can you prepare them to take MAP? And the honest answer is, this isn't the kind of thing you can study for. It's not assessing one topic or one end of unit test. It's really assessing what they know at this moment in time and how far they can go. So the best way to prepare them is be at school on time so they don't feel flustered when they're going in to do that. To give them foods that power their brain. Protein is great on those assessment days because it just helps wake them up. Getting good rest before the assessments, but really all the time. And I'm a parent too, I know that's hard. Encouraging growth. So our kids are very competitive, if you haven't noticed. After they test on MAP growth, the score actually pops up on their screen, and those kids know what they made last time. They know what they made this time, and they compare with each other. And so we've talked a lot about what that looks like and how we can give kids a healthy perspective on taking the MAP and really not being hard on themselves. My own daughter came home just distraught that her score dropped in the fall, and really encouraging her that, first of all, it's been summer. You haven't done a lot of schoolwork all summer. It's kind of normal to drop a little bit in the fall, but also that we're going to do our personal best and we're going to keep going. I'm going to come back to the chat. I think that's the dings I'm hearing. I'll come back and look through it to make sure I haven't missed anything people are asking. And then the last thing is, this is a big one if your kids have never taken it before. Remind them that if they get to a place where they can't answer the questions correctly or it's unfamiliar to them, this is normal, because it does continue getting more and more difficult until we figure out, okay, this is where they don't know. So we've had kids, I actually was in a kindergarten classroom, not this time, but last year, and the division symbol popped up. And they said, I don't know what this is. And so we just tell them, oh my goodness, it means that you've done so well that they're giving you, 3rd grade problems. That's amazing. Good job. Try your best and move on. And so the most important thing for them is that they know to expect that they're going to get to things that they can't answer, and that it's okay to look at it, use what they know to try to answer it, and then move on. It's a really big thing because our kids are used to knowing the answers to things. And so once they get to things that they don't know, they begin to feel like, oh, I didn't do well. So really encouraging them that it is going to get to a place that you don't know, and that's okay, and it's normal, and it means you've done a great job. And then remind them to take their time. This is a really big one here too, is because kids often feel like if I finish first, I'm the best. And in MAP, we tell them it doesn't mean you're the best. It actually means that maybe you didn't do as well as you could have done because you didn't take your time. So they get as much time as they need. If we need to stop and then they come back and finish it with in a different session, they can, but really letting them know that finishing first is not the goal. All right, so this is kind of the big thing that I want to talk about with you guys. What shifts have we made regarding MAP testing and why? And so this is really how it's going to differ from what I talked about a few years ago in the Lunch and Learn. So starting in 22-23, which was last year, we have started doing MAP testing 3 times a year, in August, January, and later early May, or late April or early May. And first of all, we backed it up in August to really make sure that we could get a snapshot, of their starting point. Again, like I said, sometimes scores do drop, particularly in the fall. If you've read any research on the summer slide, kids actually lose an average of 10% of their learning during the summer. And so it's pretty normal to see that fall score drop a little bit. Oftentimes with our community in particular, they will go home to their home countries and they won't speak English all summer. And so again, you expect a little bit of drop. We honestly feel like the mid-year data is most crucial. And so by adding that mid-year test, it gives us such a great picture of data that we didn't have before last year. So I will tell you why I think it's the most crucial. When they come in, I'm assessing what they know right now. I'm not assessing anything that I as a teacher have done. I'm assessing what they know right now. Then if we wait until April and we test them for the end of the year, then I've seen what I did as a teacher, but I no longer have time to make changes based on what they're learning because my year is over. It's April. I don't have time left. So for us, that January snapshot tells us this is what I've done as a teacher. This is how I have grown these kids. This is where I see, oh, my class may be weaker in this area. Or my class may be stronger in this area. So I, as a teacher, can now make adjustments to how I instruct individual students and my students as a group. And I still have 4 months until the end of the year to maybe correct some things that I didn't realize it wasn't coming across to kids as well as it could. So I really do feel like that mid-year data is the most important. Another thing that we've done with our math that is new this year is that we noticed that typically our data and measurement strands were the weakest in math. And it tends to happen in all schools across the world. It happened at my last school as well. And the reason for that is that typically measurement and data comes at the end of the school year. So kids would either test before they had instruction on some of that stuff because they're testing in, maybe late April and you're not doing it till May, or it would just be the last thing, right? So it was more crammed in. So what we've done with our new math program is that the big ideas for each grade level, they're going to hit those twice. So they're going to hit all of the big ideas in the fall. Then they're going to spiral back to all those big ideas in the spring and go deeper. And so what that means is, first of all, this idea of measurement and data always being last, well, now they're going to get it twice. They're going to have heard it already in the fall. They'll come back to it in the spring. The other thing with that is that sometimes you do all of your numbers and operations at the beginning of the year, and then you don't do a lot of it in the end of the year. And so then they've forgotten some of those concepts. So by spiraling through these things twice, it helps our kids know and remember and be familiar and go deeper with concepts. Then we do regularly look at MAP data. I think, prior to a few years ago, it wasn't something that I think the parent community saw it and they saw their kids' scores and they were interested in their kids' scores, but it wasn't something necessarily used by the staff. And so it is something that we do use regularly to understand our students, what they know as a whole, what we need to change, because if we see patterns, then we need to make adjustment to our instruction to match that. And so we do use that as a school. How have I been on mute for a very long time?
Like 3 seconds.
It
You're
was
fine.
a
Okay,
short time.
good. I just noticed it was on mute and I thought, oh my goodness, I hope, okay, good. All right, then I'll keep going. I don't know why it went on mute. So with MAP reading fluency, we did take away DRA, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit about this because I know parents like to see what the kids' reading level is and where they are. And so I want to tell you about this shift and what has caused us to change. So in spring of 22, really that spring, several of us were on a journey learning about the science of reading, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the science of reading. But a few classes piloted MAP reading fluency. We wanted to know what the test was like. We wanted to know how it assessed kids, how long it took, what the feasibility of doing it was. And so for spring 22, we had, I think, one class in each grade level that did it. Then at the beginning of last year, we added everyone. So all the kids in K through 4 took MAP reading fluency, but they also took the DRA test because we weren't quite sure. We were ready to rip the bandage. We didn't know how we could report to parents in a way that made sense if we didn't have DRA, which is what we had used for years. But as we continued to read and learn more, actually, by the winter and spring of last year, we discontinued the use of DRA. So I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about why we would stop using DRA. So what DRA means is developmental reading assessment. And I used DRA from the time I started teaching in 2004, really all the way through. You know, I had used it as this accurate system for reporting reading levels. But as we started learning about the science of reading, what we realized is that the DRA heavily relies on the cueing system. And I'm going to show you what that looks like. But the cueing system is actually not supported by the science of reading. And the science of reading is a body of research really over the last 20 years that is just now, probably over the last 3 to 4 years, shifting the way people teach reading in schools. And so one of the things that I actually found last year, there was a study done in October of 2016 that they looked at this assessment. It's not the DRA, but it's a very similar one. It's one I actually used in a different school. And what they found was that they had, determined what the child's independent reading level was based on one of these assessments. And then they gave them books and they scored their accuracy with the ability to read the text that was at their independent level. And what they found was that only 28.1 of the scores actually matched the reading level that the test identified. 15.6% of the kids, it was too hard. 56.3%, it was too easy. So what that means is that this kind of test that the DRA did actually missed correctly identifying 71.9% of students. And when we saw that data, along with our learning about what the science of reading looked like, we felt we could no longer use an assessment that was really so inaccurate. So I'm gonna do a little experiment to show you kind of what this looked like. Tammy, you happen to be on my screen, so can I borrow you for this experiment? So you'll have to unmute. So what this is, I'm going to show you as if I was testing you. And so what the cueing system did, which is what DRA used and what we taught for years and years and years in balanced literacy, is that you do phonics, right? That's a component, but you heavily rely on patterns. So word sentence patterns, using the pictures, using the beginning sound, all of these kind of clues. And the body of research that has come out has actually said that this is how poor readers read. But we didn't know that, and now that we've known, we're doing better. But this is how I taught for 20 years almost. So if I was to give a student this assessment, this is actually end of kinder, beginning of first grade book. I'm going to show you how you could go through the book and not really read a word. So Tammy's going to be my experimenter here. So what would happen is I'm going to read the title page. I'm going to read the first page of the book. And then Tammy, I'm going to have you read the rest of the book. But I want you to know that I have covered up some of the words so that you're using the patterns, the beginning sound, things like that, to read the text. So the book is called The Fishing Trip. All right, the fishing trip. We were going fishing. I had to get my pole. You're up.
We were going fishing. I had to get my hat. We were going fishing. I had to get my net. We were going fishing. I had to get my vest. We had to go fishing. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you read it. Sorry. I just took away my boxes.
We had to go fishing. I had to get my boat. We were going fishing. I had to get my paddle. We were going fishing. I had to get my worm. We were going fishing.
Oh.
I got my, sorry.
You're good. You're good.
I got my fish.
Actually, it's a perfect example of what we might see kids do, right? So if you notice, I covered up almost all the words in that story. I actually did this with my kids and my husband last night, and Tammy was able to read the entire book without reading the book at all. And so what the research has talked about is that these are strategies that poor readers actually use to compensate for the fact that they cannot read the text on the page. Using pictures, using beginning sounds, things like that. And so actually for a long time we did this, it was called balanced literacy. You did phonics and you did these strategies. And what they've shown is that by teaching these strategies, we're actually teaching them to use strategies that poor readers use to compensate. And so you need to start with the phonics. And so the reason that we've discontinued this is because this to me doesn't accurately identify what a child can read. It tells you, can they follow patterns? Have they memorized these sight words, right? I, my, and then even, fish is the last word. So an SH would not have been taught yet until the middle of the year kindergarten. So it's things like that that we want to be sure that we are accurately assessing their ability to actually read what's on the page and not guess and predict and use poor strategies. So once we learned that research again, we felt we could no longer use a test that was really in large percentage inaccurate. And so that is why we did switch to MAP reading fluency. MAP reading fluency, and we're going to look at right now. We needed something alternative that was rooted in that science. So MAP reading fluency is going to start with things like this. So this is actually part of the sentence reading fluency, which falls in the middle. It'll do the foundational skills first, then it'll do sentence reading fluency, then it'll do oral reading. So it will have a decodable sentence. So a kid should be able to read that and they'll click on the picture. They do get increasingly more difficult. Then when it goes into oral reading, it starts with a warm-up. So the back one that you can see on there with Jen and Dad, that's actually a warm-up for younger grades. It's a picture book. A warm-up for older grades is going to be this graphic novel. This first one, it doesn't affect their score. It does capture them reading, but it doesn't affect their score. Then they would go into something that looks like this. And so again, this is like late first grade through our fourth graders. They're reading a passage. It's being captured in their microphone. And then they will answer questions after it. So that's what MAP fluency looks like. That's why we've switched from DRA. But with that, you need to understand how levels are reported. So before with DRA, you would get a number that can correlate with a letter, and this is their reading level. With MAP reading fluency, what it gives us is Lexile levels, which have been used for years and years. It's not new. It is rooted in science. So when you get their assessments, this is your MAP growth on this side, and your MAP growth is going to give you this Lexile range. And so there's a little footnote about the range. So what it gives you is 100 points, the range is 100 points lower than their identified level to 50 points higher. So if I want to calculate what their actual Lexile level is for this child that's on here, I'm going to add 100 points. So this child's actual comprehension level is 1190. Again, the reason they give you this band is that you can give them things within this 100 points lower and 50 points higher, and it's really good indicator that they'll understand and that it will sufficiently challenge them. So your MAP growth is going to give you that Lexile score. That score that is on their MAP growth, that is going to be for their reading comprehension. So do they understand what they read? The MAP reading fluency, which is on the right, that's giving you their fluency, which fluency is made of rate. So how quickly they read, they're not rushing, that you can understand them, but it's not delayed because they're still really, really trying to sound things out, that they sound like a typical reader. Their accuracy, are they getting the words right, and their understanding. So there's a separate Lexile level, you'll see right here, it's 575 for this. This is the same child. So the way that we can use this as teachers is if I see, wow, this kid comprehends really well, but their oral reading rate is 575. And while 575 isn't bad, you can see right here, it is a little bit lower than a typical 4th grade student. So I, as a teacher, and you as a parent, can say, okay, we need to have them read aloud, reading increasingly more challenging texts, and build that fluency because they are comprehending. And so we actually created, and this is on here for you, but I want you to see, it's a chart. And so there are Lexile conversions all over the internet. They're all slightly different. Not by a whole lot, but we wanted one chart that we could use. And so what we did was take those and put it into one. So this is what we use at Village. So like when I look at that student that we just looked at, 575 for the oral reading, it's not terrible, right? It's in this kind of 3rd grade band, and it is the beginning of 4th grade for this kid, but I want to make sure I'm increasing that. And then if you look at the comprehension, this 1190, well, this kid comprehends way up high. This is here in grade 7 to 12. And so it shows me how, as a teacher and as a parent, what I can do next to increase their ability to read. All right, so shifting gears. We want to look at reports. When do you get them and how will you read them? So we can't send reports out until the fall window has closed. And so what that means is the entire school has a window. Middle school, high school, and elementary are all considered one school. So middle school is testing this week. The lower school and high school, they're already finished. They should do their makeups next week, and then we hope to get reports out to you quickly after that. But we have to wait because there's certain data that won't show until the window is closed. We will attempt to use the family report again. We used this in fall of 21. But they had some IT troubles last time, so we may have to send the progress report, which you're used to seeing. I'm going to show you both, and I'm going to show you how they're different. And I saw somebody was asking about the MAP fluency report. So I was playing around with it last night to see what we could do. So currently, MAP reading fluency is also new for MAP. So we jumped in kind of right as they were in the beta testing. And because it's new, their reports aren't as good as MAP growth in that they're not as shareable. So our report that we have, we can use and we can work with, but they're not shareable yet with parents. And so your teacher will have it at parent-teacher conferences, but we don't yet have a way to send that home to you. But we can definitely communicate with you, Lexile levels where they're showing. And I'm hopeful I'm going to communicate with MAP about that as I'm meeting with them next month. That's something that they can add. So these are the 2 reports for MAP growth. So we're talking about reading, math, language usage. So the MAP family report, I actually love. I think it is way more helpful for me. Even me, I know how to read these MAP reports. I think it's just much better. So that's what's here on the left. I like seeing a bar graph. I feel like this ability to see how they've gone up is really readable. The other thing I really like about it is that it shows achievement and growth. And we're going to look at that on the next slide. This is the typical one. This is the one that you guys have gotten for years, except for that one year that we tried to send this and had an issue with it. But again, I'd like to try to send that again because this student progress report, for me who looks at these reports all the time, is not incredibly helpful. It's hard to see how the kid has gone up. All of these, I'm sorry, I'm really cold. My chin is quivering. All of these in here, it's hard to know what is what. The thing I do like about this is it gives you the district grade level mean. So the district grade level mean is Village because we're not a part of a larger district. If we were a part of HISD and everybody was taking MAP, then it would give us what is, HISD scoring on average in whatever grade this is. But because we're an independent school, that district grade level mean is going to tell us village. What is village average? So you can kind of look at your child in comparison to village average. Blue is your student score, and yellow is the normative data. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So again, what I really like about this is that on this side, you've got your average achievement. So it's going to tell you where they are regarding what they're expected to know at this point in their grade level. So like this one, it says that they're in the 47th percentile, which means that if you lined up 100, I don't know what this is, let's say third graders, that 46 kids would be lower than them and that they would be higher than 53. But I love this growth one. And I think this is probably the most beneficial for our kids at Village because our kids tend to be very high. And so, average achievement is typically at Village going to be over 70, over the 70th percentile. I'm going to come back to this question in a minute. But the important thing is, are they growing? Because if they're not growing, then what are we doing? And so we want to make sure that, teachers actually look at a report that has quartiles and it shows, low achievement, low growth, high achievement, high growth, low achievement, high growth, and high achievement, low growth. So we can actually look at where kids are. But I think that growth is really beneficial for you as parents and for us as a school to make sure that just because your kid might be high, they're continuing to grow. This is on there, and again, I'm going to send out the presentation. So I felt it was important if parents need to know what these terms are, that you can use that. But the normative data is this chart. And so MAP norms their data every 5 years. So these are the 2020 norms. So in 2025, we'll get new norms, and they do change. There's a link at the very end if you want to go and dig into how they get normative data. They actually do between 3.5 and 5.5 million kids to norm the data and see what would be expected of kids at this age. So, if you look at the normative data for reading in kinder, it's 136.65. The SD means standard deviation. So if you're looking at a bell curve, they would be, about 12.2 points higher or lower would be typical. So we do use this, but because our kids tend to be higher, we actually, I think that's on the next slide, created our own. And so this is just something that we track. We use it for admissions to look at, if you look at that kinder mean, you can see the difference. The different, 136.65 is normative, but for us, 147.3 is normal at the beginning of the year. So this helps us look at our students and where our students are. There is also really good private school data that MAP releases. I think Mr. Bill actually talked about it, how we tend to be, higher than private schools as well. But we use this and we use it to look at kids' growth and also our grade level achievement, and are we continuing to push that? So for us, these are the last 3 years. So it doesn't include this year, but it's the 2021 school year, the 2020 to 2021, 2021 to 2022, and 2022 to 2023. And so these will change next year because we'll, scooch a year forward, but we do use that to look at. And then there's an asterisk there, just so you know, we only have done winter once, so that's just the winter score from last year. And then this is what the MAP fluency report looks like. So again, this is if they made it easily shareable, this is what you would see, but your teacher will have access to this and can definitely talk about it. So on the MAP fluency report, you would see, M for if they meet grade level, the key is up above, it actually matches MAP growth. You would have their oral reading measure. It would tell you what are their next steps. So actually for this kid, even though they are, their Lexile level is lower than the grade level, they are reading with good rate accuracy and their understanding is solid. So what we need to do, you can see it says include higher levels of text. So you're continuing to push them. And then the sentence reading fluency is what we talked about, how, those sentences that they're matching. So this is what the report looks like for reading fluency. Again, I feel like it's not as friendly for parents. It doesn't have the ability to show growth over time yet. But I'm hopeful that they're developing all of those things. All right, let me go, before we just ask questions, let me pull up the chat and see if we've got questions in the chat. I'm not great with Teams yet, sorry. There it is. All right, so I'm going to go back to the top really quickly and just scan through, and then I'll let you guys ask anything that wasn't asked. So somebody asked about getting the reading fluency. I think I answered that. Is village average calculated across all the classes for a particular grade? So yes, we do calculate all of the kindergartners, all of the first graders, all of the second graders. I actually track a lot of data that I don't share with everybody, but I have tracked all the grade levels all the way back to 2016. And I actually track them as a cohort as well, because it may be that, the third graders this year tend to score higher than they had in the past. So we're tracking them by cohort, but also by year. And we're trying to make sure that, there was a little dip from 2020 through really last year, across the world. Including Village, we saw the lowest kindergarten scores and first grade scores we had ever seen at Village at the beginning of last year. But again, you're looking at how the pandemic has affected learning and all of that. So we're expecting to see that continue to go back up. The really wonderful and remarkable thing is that the end of year scores, the teachers were able to get within a point of where they had been, even though they started significantly lower. So there's all of that. But yes, we do track a ton of data. Somebody asked, is information about different percentiles available? Like how 20%? So Village, for their own acceptable range, so we're using our normative data. Again, we use that a lot with when we look at kids for admissions. We want to make sure that we're not bringing in outliers. So you don't have to be the highest of the high flyer, but our teachers have to be able to serve you within a typical Village classroom, which means that you can't be, kind of outside of the norms. We also use it when kids are super, super high. If we need to have conversations about perhaps a child skipping a grade, which we don't have a lot, but we do have occasionally. The information about the different percentiles for the world norms, that is widely available. That's all over the internet, and I actually think I have it linked on the next slide. The information about Village, you'll be able to see the district norm again when you get it, but that chart is just something we created. It's on the presentation, so I'm not hiding it from you. But we do have our own kind of acceptable range, yes. Any other questions? Well, I'm going to show you guys what's on here. And again, I'm going to send this out. But the last slide is just a ton of resources. So I want you to, and again, some of this is really heavy reading. Like if you're really interested in data and how things are gathered, it's not light reading. But if you are interested, it's here. So there's these interpretive tables. It's a really long information sheet, but it's got a bunch of stuff about map reading fluency. The Growth Family Toolkit is not as heavy. It's got some good stuff for families. Same with this parent guide to map. If you're curious about map reading fluency with Lexile, it's there. The Lexile website is also there. And it's got good information for parents and students on looking for books that fit where a kid is. This is actually the link to the article that I referenced. You have to be able to access professional articles, but that's there if you want to some more heavy reading. Reading Rockets is a great resource for tons of reading education for you, great resources for kids on the science of reading. This is an interesting TEDx talk from a university that just talks about, can we ignore this science of reading, because people do like to ignore data, and honestly this data was ignored for quite a while, but can we afford to ignore it? Then what science says about how kids learn to read, and just the normative data overview. So again, that's like heavy reading on how they do their normative data. All right, I'm going to flip back. I can see that we got one more question. Are the map questions on the Village map test from a common pool? So yes, the map questions are a common pool created by MAP. So it's not necessarily for private schools. The difference is going to be that our kids will generally start higher. So instead of, and that's the beauty of, again, this difference between taking something like the STAR test, where it's just evaluating, they're in 3rd grade, do they know 3rd grade content? The beauty is that it's really going to start them where they are and where they need to be. But yes, it is a common pool of questions. Will they appear again during the spring? Typically not. If a child got it wrong, it might appear again. But there are 42 to 43 questions for each one. And so typically they wouldn't remember it even if it does repeat. But yeah. Anybody else? Any other questions? Well, thank you guys so much. I am hopeful that after October, we can have our community education be back in person, but it's always nice to have it, and we will continue to record them so that we can send it out. But this will go out to parents as well today. But I appreciate you guys. Thanks to Tammy for being my reading guinea pig. And you guys have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.